12 years after my husband left, I never imagined I'd run into him at a car showroom. Yet there he was, in the polished luxury dealership, a place I certainly didn't expect to see him again. It had been over a decade since Mark walked out of our lives, leaving me to raise our daughter alone. Now here he stood, inspecting a sleek silver sports car as if nothing had changed. I froze, my hand resting on the door of the modest sedan I was considering. My daughter, Lily, now 17 and about to start her senior year of high school, stood beside me, unaware of the tension in my body as she scrolled through her phone, likely texting her friends about our uneventful car shopping trip. "Mom, what do you think about this one?" Lily asked, finally looking up. Her gaze followed mine, and recognition flashed in her eyes as she saw him. I could only nod, speechless. Mark hadn't noticed us yet, and for a brief moment, I thought about quietly slipping away. But then he turned, and our eyes locked across the showroom floor. Time seemed to freeze as a flood of memories overwhelmed me. Our first meeting in college, our wedding day, the birth of our daughter, and all the little moments that defined our life together. But just as vividly, I remembered the arguments, the growing distance between us, and finally, the day he told me he couldn't do it anymore. He needed to find himself. And then, he was gone. Mark's face shifted from surprise to something I couldn't quite place. He hesitated, then started walking toward us. Instinctively, I wrapped my arm around Lily, who tensed beside me. "Sarah," he said softly, his voice gentler than I remembered. "And Lily, my God, you've grown so much." Lily stared at him, her expression a mix of curiosity and resentment. "Hi," she said curtly, and an awkward silence settled between us. I cleared my throat, searching for something to say. "So, you're car shopping?" I finally managed, immediately feeling foolish for stating the obvious. Mark nodded, running a hand through his hair, an old nervous habit I remembered well. "Yeah, I recently moved back to the area. Thought it was time for a change," he said, glancing at the sports car he'd been eyeing. "What about you?" "Lily's starting her senior year," I explained. "We thought it was time she had her own car, especially with college applications coming up." Mark's eyes widened in surprise. "Senior year already? Wow, I've missed so much." The pain in his voice was undeniable, and despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy. But Lily's posture stiffened, and I could feel her anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Yeah, you have," she said, her tone cold. 12 years worth, to be exact. Mark flinched as if struck. "Lily, I know I have a lot to make up for. I'm so sorry." "Save it," Lily snapped. "I don't need your apologies. Where were you when I had my first dance recital? Or when I broke my arm in 6th grade? Or when I won the science fair last year?" I squeezed Lily's shoulder, trying to comfort her and remind her we were in public, but I couldn't bring myself to stop her. These were things she needed to say, things she'd been holding in for too long. Mark looked devastated, but to his credit, he didn't try to defend himself. "You're right," he said softly. "I've made so many mistakes, and I know I can't make up for the time I've lost, but if you'd let me, I'd like to try to be part of your lives again." Lily tensed beneath my arm, ready to unleash another wave of hurt and anger, but before she could, a salesman appeared, completely unaware of the emotional minefield he was stepping into. "Can I help you folks with anything?" he asked. The interruption gave us a brief moment to collect ourselves. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. "We're just looking at cars for my daughter," I explained to the salesman. "She'll be starting college next year." The salesman's eyes lit up. "Well, congratulations. That's a big milestone. Let me show you some of our models that are popular with college students. They're reliable, fuel-efficient, and have all the latest safety features." He led us toward a row of compact cars. I glanced back at Mark, who stood there looking lost and uncertain, a far cry from the confident man who had walked out on us all those years ago. For the next hour, we listened to the salesman's pitch, test drove a few cars, and discussed financing options. All the while, I could feel Mark's gaze from across the showroom. He had retreated to a quiet corner, pretending to look at brochures, but clearly watching our every move. Finally, after we settled on a sensible blue hatchback for Lily, the salesman left to draw up the paperwork. In the quiet that followed, Lily turned to me, her eyes a mixture of emotions. "Mom," she said softly, "what do we do about him?" I sighed, glancing over at Mark, who was now pretending to be engrossed in the features of a minivan. "That's up to you, sweetheart. If you want to talk to him, we can. If you want to leave without saying goodbye, we can do that too. Whatever you decide, I'm with you." Lily bit her lip, thinking. After a long pause, she nodded. "I think we should talk to him, not because I forgive him or anything, but because I want him to know what he missed. Is that okay?" I hugged her tightly, half marveling at the strong, mature young woman she had become. "Of course it's okay. You lead the way." Together, we walked over to where Mark stood, his eyes uncertain as he noticed us approaching. With her posture tense as he approached, Lily took a deep breath and was the first to speak. "We're getting ready to leave," she said, her voice steady. "But before we go, I want you to know something. You missed out on so much. You weren't there for my first day of kindergarten when I was terrified, but Mom made it okay. You missed when I learned to ride a bike, and when I fell and scraped my knee, Mom kissed it better. You missed all my school plays, science fairs, and the time I scored the winning goal in soccer." Mark listened, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Lily's voice grew stronger with each word. "But most of all, you missed seeing how amazing Mom is. She did everything on her own. She worked 2 jobs to make sure I had everything I needed, came to every event, helped with every project, and loved me enough for both parents. She's the strongest person I know, and I'm proud to be her daughter." As Lily spoke, I felt my own eyes fill with tears. I had always tried to shield her from the struggles we faced, but she had understood far more than I realized. Mark nodded, silent for a moment as he fought to find his voice. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "You're right, Lily. I missed out on so much, and that's my biggest regret. Your mom, she's always been incredible. I was too selfish to see it back then, but I see it now." He turned to me, his eyes pleading. "Sarah, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but is there any chance we could talk sometime? I'd like to apologize properly to both of you. And if you're open to it, I'd love to try to be part of Lily's life again, on your terms, of course." I looked at Lily, letting her decide. After a moment of thought, she nodded slightly. "We can talk," she said, "but don't expect miracles. You have a lot to make up for." Mark's face lit up with hope. "Thank you. That's more than I deserve. I promise I won't." As we exchanged contact information, a wave of mixed emotions washed over me. The anger and hurt were still there, but beneath it all was a flicker of something new, not quite forgiveness, but perhaps the possibility of healing. The salesman returned with the paperwork, and as we finalized the purchase of Lily's new car, I found myself reflecting on the unexpected turn the day had taken. 12 years ago, when Mark left, I thought my world had collapsed. But looking at my strong, compassionate daughter and the life we had built together, I realized it had been the beginning of a new chapter. As we prepared to leave, with Mark lingering uncertainly behind, Lily surprised me by turning to him. "Do you want to see my new car?" she asked, her tone cautious but not unkind. Mark's face lit up with a genuine smile. "I'd love to," he said. Together, the 3 of us walked out to the parking lot, heading toward Lily's shiny new blue hatchback. It wasn't the family reunion I once imagined, but it was a start. As I watched Lily proudly point out her car's features to her long-absent father, a sense of peace settled over me. The future was uncertain, but we would face it together, just as we always had. And maybe, just maybe, there was space for healing and new beginnings. As we drove away, Lily at the wheel of her new car and me following behind in my old reliable sedan, I caught sight of Mark in the rearview mirror. He stood there, watching us leave, a solitary figure framed by the setting sun. In that moment, I understood that while we couldn't change the past, the future was ours to shape. For the first time in 12 years, I felt truly ready to embrace whatever that future might hold.